A very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. I'm Ritvika Gupta. Over the last 11 seasons, we at Leaders of Tomorrow have consistently emphasized the significance of India's MSME sector and its role in accelerating economic growth. MSMEs contribute approximately 30% to the country's GDP, account for 48% of its exports, and provide employment opportunities for around 110 million people across India. Tonight, we'll be bringing you the big ideas and strategies that can further enhance the contribution of MSMEs to India's economic growth. In the first segment, I'll be in conversation with Vinod Kumar, Honorary President of India SME Forum. And in the second segment, we'll be joined by Animesh Saxena, Past President, Federation of Indian Micro and Small Medium Enterprises.
In a land where diversity and resilience intertwine, where dreams are nurtured and innovation flourishes, Leaders of Tomorrow commemorates World MSME Day, a fitting tribute to the backbone of the Indian economy. From the colourful lanes of Chandni Chowk to the entrepreneurial spirit of Bengaluru, from the textile mills of Ahmedabad to the buzzing bazaars of Chennai, India's MSMEs are the driving force behind its growth story. Did you know that MSMEs contribute to over 36% of India's total manufacturing output? They are the engines of job creation, empowering millions of individuals with livelihoods and helping transform lives across the country. Today, on World MSME Day, as we celebrate the spirit of vocal for local, as we acknowledge the tremendous contributions of these small giants, we have the President of India SME Forum, Vinod Kumar, and Past President and Chairman of Foreign Trade Committee FISME and MD Niti Clothing, Animesh Saxena, joining us to celebrate the growth engines of Indian economy.
Thank you, Vinod, for joining us today. So the theme for our show is Ideas for New India. To begin with, tell us what are some of the big ideas or the ways through which MSMEs can contribute to the growth of India's economy and the vision for a new India and $1 trillion economy?
That's a very interesting question. We have been talking about a new India which is going to dawn on us and which will take together the millions and millions of people that are in this country. You know, one of the most important things that the government has been doing for the past 10, 12 years is economic empowerment of women. Now, if you ask me why is that important, well, we're talking about almost half the population of India not exactly in any economic activity. And on one hand, we're talking about almost 20 crore women, which are as part of self-help groups across India. And we've heard a lot about Mudra and Stand Up India and a lot of other platforms that have been set up to support such women. Now, what I'd like people to imagine is even if we are able to convert just 1 crore women from whatever means of livelihood that they are following up today to higher order enterprises, and if we are able to get 1 crore new enterprises into the economy, just imagine what will that do. Imagine your GDP, imagine the number of jobs created. So what we are talking about is we could have as many as 10 crore jobs created in a matter of couple of years. Now that is what a focus on women entrepreneurship will continue to do for us and for the country. You have less than 0.2% of people that are actually looking at a vocation or a opportunity for entrepreneurship or a business or something like that. But if we were to change that ratio and look at 1 out of every 10 youth in India looking at setting up a new enterprise, a startup, or getting into entrepreneurship and becoming a job creator rather than a job seeker, now that will change the entire focus of the country from being a job-seeking country to a country which can create jobs not only for Indians but also for people from all around the world.
Vinod, in today's dynamic business landscape, what according to you are some of the key industry developments that MSMEs need to focus on or take note of, in terms of digital adoption or scaling? What can you tell us?
From the last 5 years, India SME Forum has been trying to put in place mechanisms for small and medium enterprises to get onboarded on this digitization and digitalization bandwagon. Now, a lot of people have been asking us, why are you forcing us? Why are you telling us to do all that? But we all understand that even if we're talking about a 10% increase in productivity of the MSMEs, it is directly going to have a proportional increase of that very amount in our GDP. Now, compare that, a 10% increase in productivity may not yield more than a 5% increase in profitability, but just look at what that will do to MSMEs. Cross-border e-commerce around the world is expected to grow to $8,000 billion. Now look at how big the pie is going to get. Now if we can get small and medium enterprises, micro enterprises, rural enterprises on board this very phenomenon, what we can see is people connected to markets throughout the world, sitting in their very area that they are operating from. And that is going to bring a huge amount of change to everybody that we are talking about.
Could you also tell us about some of the initiatives that India SME Forum has undertaken to boost India's entrepreneurial development?
What we've been able to do is pilot studies throughout the country on self-help groups. And like I said, we've got more than 20 crore women engaged in them. So we've worked in the past with rural livelihood missions in 2 states and engaged with over 24,000 women, out of which we've been able to enable almost 1,100 women in higher order enterprises. That essentially means the average turnover of that woman's business today is from anywhere between 8 lakhs to 40 lakhs. Almost near the GST limit. From where were they before? They were doing very small work, just doing labor most of the times. And what we figured out is that a little effort can actually support them, and they can find the right mechanism for conducting their livelihood, doing their business, not only supporting their own families, but also employing other women in the process. From the last 2 years, we've been working on an initiative called the India Exports, where every year we have decided that we are going to bring a new set of 1 lakh MSMEs into the exports fold. And that also includes women, and what you rightly mentioned earlier, which is how do you get MSMEs digitized? How do you get them to embrace technology? And that is precisely what we've been doing in 2 of our very important initiatives. One of them is accelerating business exponentially using technology, which we've already been to 22 states. We've already engaged with close to 1,40,000 SMEs in the past year and a half. And the second part of which is future-proofing of Indian retail enterprises. And there we've already got 37,000 odd entrepreneurs that we have engaged with in the past year or so.
So I'm keen to understand what, according to you, are the primary concerns today for MSMEs, or some of the challenges that are hindering their growth in India, and how can these be addressed? What kind of support is needed from the government in this case?
On one hand, we have around 35 lakh enterprises starting every year on year. And on the other hand, we are trying to accelerate this by getting maybe a crore and a half of new entrepreneurs getting onto the entrepreneurship bandwagon. But do we have the infrastructure for them? Do we have the plug and play facilities for them? Do we have industrial or MSME parks for them throughout the country? No. And it's a firm no. The central government has put in place their cluster development schemes and all that, where we're talking about building infrastructure for the new generation which is going to set up businesses. But the fact remains that we do not have the entrepreneurship infrastructure ready to handle the rush of people that are coming in, and that is dejecting a lot of people from getting into entrepreneurship. Invariably, an entrepreneur around the world spends less than 3 days in a year on reporting and compliance. But when you look at India, you'd be surprised to know an entrepreneur in India spends 16% of his or her productive time in reporting and compliances. Now, can you imagine the difference?
Can you also tell us something about building an international MSME alliance? Currently, there are not many such alliances for MSMEs. And how do you think G20 can be a platform to build this framework and perhaps pioneer a global MSME revolution?
I can today tell you we can learn from Georgia, Estonia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. Forget about China for a minute. Every other country we have so much to learn from, but where is the mechanism for sharing what is working? There's no mechanism. Even at the United Nations level or the WTO, primarily we talk about supporting trade and all of that, but there is no mechanism which can help policymakers understand exactly what are the things that have worked across these various geographies. And then, once you have a repository of something like that, we can foster discussions throughout the world. And India can be the leader in this to take the rest of the world along. We believe in taking everybody along. And if we are able to create a conducive ecosystem for not just our own MSMEs by learning from experiences of others, but also help other countries.
Well, it was great chatting with you, Vinod. Thank you for joining us. It's time for a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're here with us on IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11, and you're watching our very special coverage on World MSME Day in conversation right now with Animesh Saxena, former president, FISME. Animesh, thanks for being with us today on World MSME Day. So to begin with, could you provide an overview of the current landscape pertaining to India's MSME sector? And which sectors do you think are set to witness exponential growth this year? And also what, according to you, are the factors fueling this growth?
Currently, the MSME sector in our country, we had the last 3 years very, very tough time. A lot of MSME perished during this. They couldn't sustain the pandemic and the impact of that. But now, fortunately, this year we saw the MSMEs coming back to life again, and a lot of new entrepreneurs also came. And now we see, especially domestically, they are doing good now. This year has been good for them. And now what we see, the kind of thrust the government is pushing and the 5 trillion economy which the Prime Minister has given as a target, we see next 2-3 years should be good. The way economy is growing almost 6 to 7%. So we see a good prospects in next 3 years for MSMEs.
Animesh, access to finance has been a pertinent problem for MSMEs in India. What recommendations do you have for small businesses, in India when it comes to seeking funding today?
You see, the biggest challenge, which is not new, it has been for many years, which the MSMEs has been facing, to get a collateral, because most of the banks and the financial institution still insist for collateral. It's not easy, though the government has announced a lot of schemes with the SIDBI and the fintech that certain amount of loan can be given without collateral, but on the ground it is not happening. The people at the last mile connectivity who have to disburse this, they still insist for a collateral, which has been a challenge, and government has to seriously work on that guideline, how it can be done. So what's one suggestion, we felt that with this lot of fintech and NBFCs coming in the market, if government can tie up with them, with the banks, especially the public sector banks, and some sort of arrangement where the distribution can be done at the last mile level, and there has to be very, very specific guidelines that up to what level this no collateral is required. These days with this, especially with the GST regime and all the digital mapping of your transactions, government has and the institution has a good data record of your GST returns and everything. On that basis, it should be taken as probably as a record or the benchmark for giving you the money without collateral.
Animesh, in terms of the export market, the last couple of years saw multiple shocks affecting the global economy, such as the Russia-Ukraine war, inflation and a global recession. International trade growth is projected to be minimal in 2023. Considering these trade challenges, what are your thoughts on SMEs venturing into the export market?
We are seeing the impact of this, especially from India. If I talk about one industry like textile and apparel, which is a large employment intensive industry for India, and we are seeing the negative impact of that. The demands are less this year, and it's not showing any sign of recovery soon, which the government has also set up an ambitious target for us, but we are struggling to meet that.
From your perspective, what are the primary hurdles that Indian MSMEs encounter when exporting their products abroad, particularly regarding logistics and costs?
I'll cover one or two more things in this, apart from this logistics and costs. Is the quality of the product and access to the market also. So being an MSME, you have a very limited access to the markets. India has to create a good and smooth working model where if you have to import the raw material or semi-finished goods or equipments, it should be hassle-free, which is still not. We still face a lot of issues and the policy changes where the duties or import duties, they keep on changing. Anti-dumping duty comes all of a sudden. So these are the challenges which doesn't allow us a good opportunity to become a part of the GVC. Second, the logistic. Logistic costs in India is still high. Fortunately, the sea freights have come down to almost the pre-COVID level, and container availability has improved. But for an MSME, which has to use not a full container load, for them, the logistic cost is still a challenge. Domestic logistic cost, like moving the goods from to the nearest port, is still very high. Road transportation very high. Time taken is high. So unless the government works on this, plus the shipping industry, especially the forwarders and these CHAs, there is no transparency in the price mechanism. There is no regulation on them. There is no regulatory authority which control their pricing. So government has to work on that, because for MSME, the logistic cost is really, really high.
In 2021, the Ministry of Textiles set an ambitious target of achieving $100 billion in textile and garment exports over the next 5 years. And as we know, MSMEs constitute a significant portion of businesses in this sector. Tell me, as the MD of Niti Clothing, what role do you believe MSMEs play in accomplishing this goal? Is the target overly ambitious?
Target is definitely ambitious, and MSME can play a very important role. You see, even current data, MSME contributes almost 50% of India's export. And with this online and this kind of market, which has exploded in the last few years and is growing at a much faster rate, we feel MSME can play a bigger role in achieving this, helping to achieve this target, especially in the e-commerce area. The government has realized this potential of this e-commerce, especially from MSME, and with this recently launched foreign trade policy, they tried to ease out the e-commerce challenges. There were a lot of challenges, but one major issue which is still would be a sticking point for the government, in e-commerce there has to be a very, very smooth, hassle-free return policy. And in fact, if you see the e-commerce which has succeeded everywhere globally, because of hassle-free return policy, no question asked return policy. We have been requesting government to bring a PLI for an MSME also in the textile and apparel, because that PLI was limited to very large turnover companies, so very few people took advantage of that. So if government PLI 2 can be brought, which caters to MSME in textile, that could be a game changer, because we are not tapping the 65% of the global market.
Animesh, tell us, how can digitalization contribute to enhancing the operations and exports of MSMEs?
A lot. And especially the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise for that, where the physical movement and connectivity was not there, and people switched over to digital right from their financial transactions as well approaching the customers. And e-commerce has been the biggest success story for this digital, where right from your payment, your documentation, and approaching your customer and catering to that customer is all digital. So in the shipping also, what we see, the government has introduced most of is paperless kind of digital transaction. where it can be done. So digital has played a big role, and in the coming time also, it will have a further bigger role where you can track your goods, you can monitor the production, you can offline, you can handle your operations. So this will play a big role.
Finally, tell us, how can the government and private players ensure sustainable development of MSMEs?
This is a known fact, and this is a sad fact that there are a lot of trust deficit. So government has to, trust the MSMEs for certain regulations and compliances. Still, there's a plethora of compliances which an MSME has to go through it, and following them and comply with that. MSME typically is a one-man show kind of industry. Especially in the small sector. And for them, handling everything and meeting all the government requirements require a lot of additional support. Either they hire, which they cannot afford, or they're through consultancies, other things. So government has to make it life easier for them. And then only is sustainable. Because the way India's, the youth population, which we are biggest in the world now, and we have to take advantage of that, we have to provide them the opportunities in the MSME only. And for growth of MSME, especially the educated youth which is coming to start their own industry, there has to be minimal government interference in that. Otherwise, what happens, especially we have noticed that the young people who want to have their own industry, especially the manufacturing, they get frustrated with the kind of requirements and they give up. And they look for jobs in some, fancy multinational IT companies and these kind of companies to bring them back in the manufacturing, and which is the only solution to provide jobs in our country, because with the large population which is semi-skilled, not fully educated, to get them a job, you require MSME sector, especially manufacturing, where you're going to absorb them with a little training. So government has to come with some sort of a very, very flexible laws and some trust with these MSMEs, maybe some time given to them. By the time, like a startup, government has given them some 3-4 years. The same way in the manufacturing and MSME also, they should be given some relaxation for few years till the time they stand on their own feet and start complying and following those norms.
Thank you, Animesh. It was good talking to you. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. We hope you enjoyed our exclusive episode on World MSME Day. I'm Ritvika Gupta signing off. Thank you and good night.